Hey everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning. Dave's coming along. This is what he said to me. Had to restart my computer. Start without me. I'll be along shortly. Yeah. So hey, waiting. Okay. So where are we? It's Thursday, June 6th, 2024. And of course, this is actually where I needed Dave, you see. Of course, what is today, June 6, 2024, is actually the 80th anniversary of D-Day, Operation Overlord, the action which took Allied troops onto the mainland of Europe for the first, well, not for the first time because they were in Italy at that point, Northern Europe into France to bring a second front against the Germans at that point. All right. So good morning, Mike. So yes, Operation Overlord took place at like some ungodly hour of the morning on this day 80 years ago, and people went from Southampton, Portsmouth, and other south coast cities in order to make that trip and land on those fateful beaches in Normandy. Right. So and also the other thing is the Allied forces had been playing tricks on the Germans for quite some time, actually trying to give any of their spies misinformation and giving the indication that there were hundreds of thousands of troops milling around in East Anglia, ready to launch from places like Felixstowe and other other East Anglian ports, even though that was a longer distance away. And that actually the trickery did work to some extent. Of course, we know what happened with the Canadian troops on Juno Beach and how they got pinned down by a panzer division that wasn't supposed to be there. Intelligence. Dave, where are you? So he'll be here shortly. So, okay. So moving on. Hey, here he is. Here he comes. I get information that Dave's come, but I've got device not connected, guys. So I don't know what's happening there. So, give him 30 seconds or so. Add to the stage. There we go. Hey, I was just commenting upon this day 80 years ago.
80 years ago. Think of all those young men hitting the beaches 80 years ago.
Yeah. And how there was a snafu on the Canadian landing because of the Panzer Division that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we walked, our lads walked right into a Panzer Division, an SS Panzer Division, no less. You know, the maniacs of the maniacs, the best and well-trained soldiers they could have hit, the fanatical SS.
Yeah.
They had a back and forth fight with the Panzer divisions for some time. They really hit it hard, but you know what? They triumphed. One of my favorite stories.
At the end of the day, yes, they triumphed.
One of my favorite stories is they went into a town and they got attacked by the Panzer division, and the commander of that Panzer, the SS division was. Later tried for war crimes against what they did to the Canadian soldiers there. But the Canadian soldiers got back at them. They set up an ambush in a town a little farther along, and they hit a half track right as it went over a bridge in the town and blocked the town, and were able to stop the Panzer division. They had a roaring good fight. But what happened is that the Panzer division went around try to end round them. But the Canadians were prepared for them and were able to stop that encirclement. but they couldn't stop it for too long because they didn't have enough equipment to take out the tanks. The tanks were heavy duty tanks, and they didn't have the stuff to knock them out. But along comes, there was a bunch of Canadian guys driving the Firefly. I don't know if you know of the Firefly. Firefly was a tank. It was the Sherman tank that was modified with a 17-pounder British gun on it. Mm-hmm. They needed a bigger gun to take out the bigger tanks. The Shermans were great. They're a great tank, but were underpowered with their gun
against the biggest of the
so what the Brits did. Yeah, so they modified them and put the 17-pounder cannon on some of the Shermans, and there was a bunch of these to be. There were Canadian boys were delivering them to where they're supposed to be, but got lost and ended up in this town, and were able to counterattack the Panzer Division just by chance.
This is where driving the wrong way helps you sometimes, right?
Yeah, they were completely lost, and they ended up right in the thick of it. And there was the 17-pounder, so they're the ones that could take out the Panthers. I thought that was a great story. But so you can imagine all those young men back in that day. Yeah. I even heard. I talked to David Niven has an Iron Cross. He's a Brit, of course, but he had an Iron Cross. He went and he joined up in the service. He hit the beaches himself. He was there around about D-Day anyway, and he got an Iron Cross. Iron Cross. So crazy is British, and the Iron Cross is a German medal. But what happened was a bunch of these Iron Crosses were being delivered to German soldiers of note. Was intercepted by the Brits, and the guy who intercepted him handed him out to his pals.
Well, I suppose
one of which was David Niven.
Yeah, and I suppose that is a morale booster, because and a morale deflator at the same time. A morale deflator to the Germans who are expecting to get these awards. And an inflator to the Allied troops who got bonus bounty. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so yesterday, and obviously we know what happened and the fact that they won victory in that war, but it was a key day 80 years ago today. So we're thankful for those guys.
I don't think an invasion of that sort could ever happen again. I mean, we see it in the horizon. China obviously wants to invade Taiwan, but feels it cannot. That would be the only thing that would match it in historical terms if that actually happened. And I just watched something on TV the other day about these huge artillery pieces left over from the Second World War, because they don't make them that big anymore.
Yeah.
But they're in Taiwan, a whole pile of them in Taiwan. They maintain them, and every once in a while they shoot them just to remind the Chinese that if you come, you're going to face one of these things.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of comments. Ukraine Day happening right now. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's move on to where we are. Bank of Canada cut the key interest rates today. Yesterday, to 4.75%. And it's an interesting thing reading this. There's two articles. The one you sent us from CBC about the governor of Tiff Macklem, saying that the bank's monetary policy no longer needs to be as restrictive, and that we've come a long way in the fight against inflation, and our confidence that inflation will continue to move closer to 2% has increased in recent months. And basically, largely the economists were expecting this, but the bad news here on these quarterly GDP numbers released last week were weaker than expected as the economy only grew by 1.7%. And I have to actually ask a question on this one is, does this really indicate a lack of investment in Canada?
Yeah, in a sense, the economic figures are dismal.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's what's worse. I mean, the silver lining here is because our economy did so terrible, we could drop our interest rates. Really,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yeah.
our economy performed miserably.
But that said,
it grew by 1.7%. I've never heard of an economy, Western economy, growing by anything less than 2% in ages.
Yeah, not in some time. Yeah, but again, the other thing to note on this, which is what the Bank of Canada report, is in the United States, the economy expanded more slowly than was expected during the course of 2023. And the global economy grew by about 3% in the first quarter of this year, which was broadly in line with the bank's monetary policy projection, and basically that was not poor showing in relation to Canada. But the other thing is that's to be I saw this and I can't find it now. There was something about China in this. China's economy was a lot stronger in the first quarter, buoyed by exports and greater industrial production.
China's not doing as great as it wants to, though. That should be put out there. Now, what I think the U.S. did not reduce their rates a couple of months ago. We've reduced ours to 1.75 or by 0.25, which means the average person will now pay, if they want to go get a mortgage, they'll be paying 6.95% instead of 7.2%, which it is right now.
Yeah.
I just talked to a lady last night that I know, and they had to downsize because when they went to renew their mortgage, it would have been another $350 a month.
Yeah.
So they decided to sell them and go down to something smaller. I've seen this. I've talked to a fair amount of people talking about the same thing. People that went ahead and bought a lot of properties and that, or bought their properties and kind of held on to the view that the lower interest rates were going to stay forever. I don't know where they get these ideas. Seriously, for anyone like me who saw the interest rates go up to 18%, I think my first house I bought, it was I was able to catch it just before the interest rates went from 16 and changed to 18, and then had to sit on that for a long time. And I got kind of lucky because I was able to assume, me and my brother bought a house, so we were able to assume a mortgage that was already on the house at 8%. And we thought, oh boy, that's great, only 8%. We're able to assume part of the mortgage at 8%. Good morning, Karen. How you doing?
Yeah, that's kind of what you would call fortuitous on your part.
Yeah, that's what we thought. And I thought when it went down to, I remember when it went down to like things like 6 or 7%, I thought, holy smokes, is that ever good?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't so good after when you compare it to what we've had.
We've been living on mortgage rates in the recent period that have been in the the 2.5% to 3% type thing. So when this interest rate rise that we had did hurt a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. And and when I renewed my mortgage after 4 years of paying down a bunch of the principal. When I renewed it, I had to pay exactly the same that so I got kind of lucky because I was paying exactly the same as it was before. But I said to the bank manager, I says, well, I've paid down X amount of the interest or the principal. He says, well, the interest rates sort of took up that slack, and so I ended up paying the same monthly bill after paying down about $15,000 on it.
Yeah.
So you should have been, it should have been much less, but it wasn't. But what am I going to do?
Yeah,
but at least other people got hit and burnt pretty high, and they had to pay much more per month.
Yeah, I suppose the kind of key one would have been, hey, sometime in 2021 and 22, you needed to have gotten it when the bank rate was at less than 0.5%, 0.25%. You need to get your mortgage then.
Yeah.
If you'd have had a fixed year like, well, if you'd have got it in 22, you're due for renewal in 27. If a fixed rate then would be great. 21, you'd be looking at a 26 renewal, and 20, of course, you'd be looking at a 25 renewal.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so it talks about how much this will change, and they talked about, and they talk here about they took an example of a certain family. And they said that their discretionary funds, they are very much more cognizant of how they spend their discretionary funds. And the discretionary funds are those things that are not essential, like the ones to pay the mortgage, the gas, the electrical. So anything left over, you have to buy. But that also meant they started having to rethink groceries. And when you start rethinking groceries, you got to think to yourself, now, I don't buy Cocoa Krispies. I don't buy candy or anything else like that in the grocery store. I only buy food. So I can't really see. I could probably think of buying something cheaper, maybe a cheaper brand of bread or something. I don't know. But for the most part, for me, grocery bills are grocery bills, and there's nothing way I can avoid it. But when they're talking about discretionary funds, you get a lot of people buying a lot of stupid things in the stores, like candy, chips, potato chips, all those things that are there. Those discretionary things, if you can cut them out, it'll probably do your health a lot of good too.
Well, that's for sure. But, I think we're addicted to a lot of that kind of stuff, aren't we?
Well, they hope you are. That's why they are. Potato chips, pretzels, I don't know, cheesies, whatever. I never buy any of that junk.
Don't advertise them, Dave. Don't encourage people to go buy them.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is tell you, don't buy them. Don't buy them. If that's part of your grocery list, cut it right out. You'll be doing yourself and your family a favor anyway. And who the heck buys Cocoa Krispies? That's idiotic. I don't know.
Well, I want to know who the heck buys white bread. That's idiotic as well.
Me too.
Pure horrible white bread. Some of those white breads are actually have the the food value of a chunk of cardboard.
Well, what they do is they take because white bread is especially like something like Wonder Bread, was a spongy thing.
Yeah.
So what they do is they bleach everything out of the grain, and then just get the carbohydrates left. Hi, Robert. Hi, good morning. And what they do is they bleach out they take everything out of the grain, and all they got is the mash of carbohydrates there. And then they add the stuff. They add the vitamin D. They add other things. So they enrich it. Look, if you get ordinary bread, good old whole wheat bread, you don't have to enrich it. It's already good, So you don't have to enrich it one bit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So moving on, Freeland is basically welcoming the Gaza ceasefire proposal, which is backed by Biden. I'm wondering, actually, I'm going to be cynical here for a minute. Is she
It's
kind
hard
of
not to be. It's hard not to be.
well, I'm going to say this is she thinking of her future? Basically, this is her, her as deputy with her deputy prime minister hat on and saying to Canada, "Hey, I'm a great leader. Think about that for the future. I can lead this country better than Mr. Trudeau potentially if Mr. Trudeau gives up. We just keep that quiet between you and me, but I'm here." I think that's what she's saying.
I'm not really sure.
Cynical, aren't I? I'm being very cynical, aren't I?
Yeah. I think what they've done here is they took her and her making the comments, so Trudeau couldn't be shackled to the comments. I think that's part of it. I think, unfortunately for the Canadian government here,
it's not
like Trudeau, like everybody else, measures their words. Like Trudeau talks about the barbaric attack on October 7th, the butchers, and then he turns around and says, "Oh, the unfortunate effects of war has to stop in Gaza." Well, how about the butchering that is happening to the Gaza people? The revenge. This is being a big revenge move, and they don't talk about that. So the Hamas killed 800 civilians and 300 or so military and police, and so they're going to pay them back by killing 20 or 30 times more people than Hamas did. It's big time revenge, huge revenge, and they don't want to say that, but they do want to say like it's got to stop.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find that article now.
Okay. Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is a Biden plan, which is actually an Israeli-backed plan.
It is supposed to be. Now, this is very, very confusing because the situation here is Biden said this is an Israeli plan. Now, everybody doesn't know where this Israeli plan comes from, but finally it comes out that during a pretty low point in the war where Israel was being criticized heavily, but more importantly, the Israeli people were demanding their hostages back. The Israeli government came up with a plan that was very similar to the Egyptian plan, that was very similar to the Hamas plan. And this plan was, a plan to the end of the war, and they propose it. But all of a sudden, they don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
Netanyahu said it was a non-starter. And then the American says, well, it was your plan. How could it be a non-starter if it's your plan? And Netanyahu says, well, I didn't endorse the plan. Well, your war committee came up with the plan. And then Hamas says, well, we like a lot of it, and we're willing to negotiate on this, but you're telling us that we have to support the war. That Hamas has to support this bill, like deal. But then Hamas turns around and says, is Israel going to support it? Yeah, we'll go behind it, but we demand that the U.S. back it up. The U.S. back up the deal, and it's not going to be any good. Hamas is going to actually want to negotiate this because the deal says that the Hamas has to go.
Yeah,
Hamas has to go, but Hamas is the one that has to accept the deal. So Hamas has to accept the deal that says they have to leave.
Yeah.
Is that going to happen?
Yeah, and this is actually the oddity about it, because Biden needs. Of course, we all know that Biden actually needs peace here. Essentially, if he's got any chance of winning the U.S. Presidential election, really peace needs to happen like yesterday for him, right? Now, the question therefore is like, this is it's a no-win situation for the Americans. So of course I see it as Biden latching on to any plan that has more than a 2% chance of succeeding. I just don't see this plan succeeding. Do you?
Well, when the spokesman for the Biden administration was asked, I think it was by Northern Irish journalist, who is pretty pesky in those meetings.
Yeah.
He said, "So you're saying that you want Hamas to accept a deal which makes it, which means that Hamas has to dissolve itself and will not be a part of the negotiating process. So you're asking Hamas to accept a deal that will dissolve Hamas."
Yeah. Yeah.
How is that going to work? And the spokesman says, well, if Hamas really wants an end to this war, that they will disband, and that'll be good for the. Really, seriously, that's going to happen. So imagine that. Imagine like in a war, France versus England. They had a big war, and England says, well, you know what? I got this really good peace process. Guess what? France cannot have its political parties anymore. You got to get rid of them, and then we can have peace.
Yeah. Well, actually, or even worse, France has to dissolve.
Yeah. Get rid of your army, and you could trust us. You could trust us. Get rid of your army.
That's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody hand over the weapons. Get rid of your army, and you can trust us because we've been so nice to you all these years.
Oh, and by the way, when the war is over, you've got to march out down this particular street. Every member of Hamas, like Hamas is going to accept that, right?
It is so stupid, unbelievably stupid, and yet this is supposed to be a point of negotiation where Hamas and Israel are supposed to be able to
but is it
come up with
a
solution for a ceasefire. But in the meantime, Israel has ramped up its attacks on Rafah, which makes Biden's red line in Rafah look more and more stupid because he hasn't done anything. And I think they killed a pile more civilians every day by dropping these huge bombs on them. And Biden's red line seems to be getting pretty soon. Biden's red line is going to be in North America. That's how far away from the reality is.
Yeah. And here's a quick reminder for Mr. Biden. We are 5 months, count them, June, July, August, September, October, and then we're in election month, right? So 5 months from now, we're in elections in the presidential election in the USA. So you needed to have had this war over a month ago.
And he's trying
people's memories to get it to stand a chance of getting it out of people's memories. Mr. Biden, you needed to have gotten this war over with a month ago. You're now putting your own election prospects in serious jeopardy. And
and what's bizarre about this? What's bizarre about this is the Americans have endorsed the so-called Israeli plan and said that it's down to Hamas to accept it. It's up to them. And Hamas replies, well, it doesn't look like the Israelis accept it themselves. So guess what? When the Israelis accept it, then we'll talk. And Netanyahu says the plan is a non-starter.
And Paul Lemire says, Biden will not make it to the post. It doesn't matter. He's talking about the presidential election, of course. And you may or may not be right, Paul. These are interesting times we live in.
Certainly they are. And Biden calls himself a transition president from the old to the new. That he is essential to transition between the ideas of his generation to the ideas of the next generation. I don't know about that, but I still think it's bizarre when they say, Hamas, you got to accept this deal, and Hamas says, well, from what we see, Israel hasn't accepted it. Yeah. Netanyahu said it was a non-starter. So why do you want us to accept it when they don't accept their own deal?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. And, it doesn't matter, irrespective of what you think about either Hamas or Israel, there's a common sense in that logic. And Paul Lemire basically says he's transitioning. Biden, of course. Yes, Paul. Yes, thank you, Paul. Okay. That's an interesting question. We live in interesting times, and I'm sure the next 5 months are going to give us a whole heap of surprises. Including that US presidential election itself. As I say, well, I'm refusing to call this one because in the past I've been pretty spot on with most elections. I'm just not sure where this one's going. All right. Okay, so moving on. Canadian border strike is set to start Friday if mediation fails. So the union representing thousands of, I think it's 9,000 border workers, said they'll begin action Friday afternoon if the borders, because they've been without a contract for 2 years now. And I actually wonder, is this part of the failure of our federal government that lets this happen, that they've been blithely just allowing this a non-contract, these contract not to be negotiated now that it's not been it's been now 2 years. This is not the first strike or potential strike we've had where there's been no federal contract organized for 2 years. Whether whatever you feel about the unions, the whole situation here is that somebody needed to have taken the bull by the horns more than 2 years ago and said, hey, this needs to be settled. Whatever the pay ends up being settled at, whatever position you take on this entire strike, it needs to have been done 2 years ago, not now. What the heck?
Well, they've been without a contract for 2 years.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to get pretty riled up. Government being government will delay all things. If they're not forced to address them, they will just delay them. Oh, we'll get around to that. So the only way that anyone's going to get any kind of, and this is in the private sector too, believe me, when steel workers or auto workers or anything else wants to be heard, finally their only option is to strike or to threaten strike. Otherwise, they're not listened to. You have to. Mao said, "Power comes from the barrel of a gun, from the muzzle of a gun." Well, power for unions or anyone else working comes from their ability to stop production, basically, to hurt their employer. If that's the only thing they have. If they are completely ignored, the workers will come back on them. In this particular case, it's been 2 years. So they've been ignored for 2 years. Their contract had ended 2 years ago, and they've been working, waiting for renegotiation. Of course, it's going to get sidelined as many times as they'll allow it to get sidelined. And so in good faith, they go ahead and work for 2 years, saying, what we got to do, we got to get our new contract. We got a new contract. The Canadian government ignores them. And then all of a sudden, okay, you can't ignore us anymore, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to start shutting down the border. How about that? Yeah, all of a sudden, okay, we'll start listening to you.
Well, they've been in mediation since Monday, right? They've got 24 hours left in mediation. I'm hoping by now that they've agreed upon some key issues, but that they've now narrowed the issue. They've agreed upon many things, I'm hoping, but there's another. Now the issue list should be down to a small number.
You would think.
I would
But
hope. I
have a feeling that, well,
labor mediations are always the toughest, right? Because you move backwards. You want. I don't know what. I don't actually know. Do you recall what the percentage is that the union's demanding? But let's say that you were asking for 10% in wages.
Well, there's a number of things. There's a number of things on this contract. It's not due to money so much.
I know. Of course it's not. No. But they don't even say in the article what the actual key issues are at stake here at this.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Well, they're talking about flexible working, remote work. Remote work options. How can you have remote work options for border people? No.
It depends on what they are. It does. It does depend on what they are.
How can
what the union's probably done there is they've included that as a bargaining chip, and they're willing to throw it away, depending. And this is what they generally do: is this is what we want, and this is our shopping list.
Yeah,
and we want fur coats and ermines and Rolls Royces. And the government says, no. You're going to get burlap for clothes, and you're going to get a skateboard. No. We want ermine, and we want Rolls Royces. No. Skateboard and burlap. Burlap is fine for clothes, and then somewhere in the middle they come to some kind of conclusion. So the government says you're or whoever the negotiator says you are the base things of life, and you only need a bag of rice and some water to live. And the union says, no, we need to live in Calogero Estates. So somewhere in the middle, they come up with a kind of a deal that is somewhere in the middle that satisfies everybody. And that's just the BS of negotiations.
Oh, we know. I know this kind of stuff goes on. The thing is about this is we don't know which of these issues have been agreed upon, which of these issues are still to be agreed upon. It would be useful to know, are we kind of 90% of the way to a strike or 90% of the way to a settlement right now?
I think they're probably, this particular government is ponderously slow.
And they are.
And so I have a feeling that when we come to Friday, there's going to be delay. They're going to postpone the walkout or whatever their actions are, because the government says, well, we don't have enough time to sort this out. Can we have another week or whatever? And union in good faith will probably say, yeah. But they will warn the government, says, look, we've been waiting for 2 years now, and you haven't come up with anything. So I don't know why we should, but we will. We'll give you another week. So there'll be that kind of thing going back and forth, I think.
But again, I come back to what I originally said. Is it a failure of our federal government that has let this slide for 2 years?
Yeah, they've known it's there.
Yeah,
they definitely have known it's there. And
whichever position you support, and I get it that I'm not one to turn around and say that the union's utterly barking mad. I don't believe that. The union wouldn't be in this position but for the situation of the federal government, had the federal government been in negotiations 2 years ago, maybe they wouldn't have to pay out quite so much as they will have to pay out today. That's what I kind of think is where could be heading.
I'm not so sure yet, but we'll see what they come up with. The border services are very essential. the government will start to get nervous pretty quick if they feel that real action is coming. Unfortunately, the union knows that only sort of that kind of action is going to wake up the government.
Yeah.
So you cannot ignore us any longer, because we're going to start shutting down the border. How about that? So then the government has to wake up. Oh, well, okay, we better negotiate this.
Yeah. And it's like shutting down the border is going to be the bit that actually hurts Canada the most. In fact, if we go back to the question we were discussing earlier on in relation to bank rates about economic growth at 1.7%, this impacts economic growth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It may not have a long-term detrimental impact if you only have a strike for a week, but that strike for a week could mean the difference between some deals happening and some deals not happening. And being blunt about it.
Yeah, and cross-border trade is going to be super essential to us, because our productivity level in this country is like very low. We need some sort of boost to our economy, and to stifle things like the border crossings, I don't know. And where was the Canadian government on this? They should have been on this earlier on. We now and particularly us here in this town, we need that border to be free and open as much as possible, because we've got a tourist season coming up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Exactly. We've got a tourist season coming up, and that is going to get impacted by, in fact, tourist season is already open, guys. If we have even 1 week delay of people crossing the border, that hurts Niagara Falls. Absolutely, it does. Right?
Burns us bad.
Yeah, it really does burn us bad. So. I hope they can get things done by Friday. Basically, to the word to negotiators, if you haven't already trimmed them down, let's be discussing and negotiating the 3 or 4 key issues from that list that are left, right? Trim the rest down, agree certain numbers of them, and get on to what's the meat and bones of this negotiation and get a deal done.
Well, the problem, the government has left it too long, and they're going to acquiesce to the demands of the union. If they had been negotiating for really negotiating for the last 2 years, they could have come to an equitable deal. But instead, what they've done is they Paul Clay Lemire says essential services cannot close them down. Yeah, but they can make a lot of problems and slow things down, and that's the problem. And if the Canadian government should have been on top of this, but the Canadian government does not want any bad press right now. So my feeling is that they will be more likely to acquiesce to the demands of the union rather than negotiate a good deal for the Canadian government.
Yeah,
because they don't want any bad press coming up to an election next year.
Yeah. Okay. What else have we got? Okay. Well, here's a big conspiracy theory for everybody who loves this kind of thing. We're shattering global temperature records. Earth hit the last 12 months straight have been record-breaking temperatures for each of those months. Well, there's a conspiracy theory in the brewing. Go ahead with that, Dave.
Well, I'll tell you this, because I told you last week that there was a study among climatologists that I think it's 2 years old now, or maybe even longer, that they were talking about the sensitivity of the atmosphere and how it affected climate change. They shelved it. They said that we must have made some mistakes, because this particular metric shows that the the climate change will be a lot more severe than we think it's going to be. So they shelved it. And that was 2 or 3 years ago, because it can't be true. These numbers can't be true that we're going to hit these hot areas. But guess what? It has been true. The last 12 months, 12 straight months, being record-breaking temperatures.
Over
150 years of temperature taking. These are the 12 hottest months in the world.
Well, this is according to data. The global average temperature for the last 12 months was the highest on record, 1.63 degrees Celsius above any of the pre-industrial averages of 1850 to 1900, according to new data by Copernicus, which is the new European Union's climate monitoring service. So they're basically saying that we're 1.63 degrees on average above the pre-industrial average temperature of the planet.
Yes, and as I said, last week or 2 weeks ago, that the rising temperatures are one of the things that are pushing people out of certain areas in the world and pushing them towards North America and Europe. North America and Europe are areas that are being affected by climate change, but it hasn't made their cities and their towns and their countries uninhabitable. Right now, what's happening in places all around the world is a lot of these places around the world have become uninhabitable because of the heat. It is even affecting the United States. As I've said before, a lot of the huge military bases that were in southern United States have to move. They have to move because the temperatures are too hot for them to function. These huge, enormous investments, military like bases, the bigger, huge ones, have to now be moved north because they're unsustainable where they are. The temperatures are too hot for the military bases to run efficiently. So they're going to have to dismantle them and move them north. The U.S. Army has seen this coming for a long time, over 20 years. And as I've said before, they can't say that it's because of climate change, but they can say it's because of the change in climate. They can't say it's because of fossil fuels or anything like that. That's a political hot potato. But what they can do is report to Congress and say it's getting too hot down there. Trying to run an Air Force base or a military compound when it's 120 degrees outside is impossible. So we're going to have to move this, and we're going to have to move it north. Unfortunately, that's the situation we find ourselves in now. Now, a lot of people think that the La Nina, La Nina, and El Nino effect is part of this 12-month thing, and it probably is. And when that switches from El Nino to El Nina, or whichever way it has to go, things will moderate themselves somewhat. Maybe so. But the truth of the matter is there is too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And a lot of the climatologists thought they had more time. And they negotiated these treaties in Paris for a 1.5 degree increase. Well, we're already there. In these last 12 months, we are 1.63 degrees over pre-industrial levels. 1.63 degrees, and 1.5 was the limit. We're supposed to limit it to 1.5, and already it's 1.63. Now that might be temporary. In a month or two, it may go down. But whatever the fact is it's going to be over one.
Well, what we don't know
going forward.
Yeah, it's what we don't know. The possibility, of course, is that we could end up with a mega bad winter this year, so we get hit by the mother of all snowstorms, and we end up with making the winter of 77 mild.
It's not like that though. It's like, remember last year we had a very moderate.
We did. I know. But what I'm saying,
the rest of the world was reporting. The rest of the world was reporting heat waves, and there was fires everywhere, and most of the rest of the world were reporting enormous temperatures.
Yeah.
But we got a break here.
Yeah.
So climate change doesn't mean that everybody burns at the same time.
Well, what I was meaning about that is that we can also get kickbacks on that, because we could end up with us being, with us getting a monster over winter in this coming winter. I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying we could. Right?
It's really irrelevant. Basically, it has to do with the whole world. Now, we may get a bad winter or an easy winter. If you ask me, our winters have been much more milder since I was a kid. Obviously, they've been hugely more mild. Last winter was incredibly mild.
Yeah.
And
one snowfall of note, right?
Yeah. So I've never seen winters like that. I remember when I was a kid, I mean, like I said before, we had ice rinks in our backyard. We had ice rinks in the parks and stuff like that. You don't have that anymore because the temperature's warm, too warm. Now, what is causing that? There's a fantastic amount of factors involved here, and when you take them all and put them all into the cauldron and come on out, the one thing that doesn't come out is why the only thing that answers why the global temperature is rising as it is the amount of CO2 in the air, and other greenhouse gases too, but particularly CO2, because it lasts a long time.
The irony of
you can talk about methane. Methane goes up in the air, and 2 or 3 years later, it's degraded and gone. The CO2 stays there.
Yeah, but the irony, of course, is that whilst we have had a recent upkick in CO2, and I've seen this measured by people who've looked at global historical measurements, that our CO2 is lower, but is probably less than a third of the CO2 levels that existed in the dinosaur era.
Well, that's completely irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant.
It is irrelevant, but it's interesting. It has gone up of late, but but CO2 varies across the planet from time to time anyway.
There was a lot more CO2 down the Devonian period 250 years ago when coal started to be, it says, when we were a kid, it was called the Ice Age, Wills. Yes, I remember riding my dinosaur to the ice rink. I do. And my woolly mammoth, maybe that would be better. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not that old.
But did Wooly go down? Did Wooly go down in the toboggan slide?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Look, I'm lucky. I may have been in a more technically advanced home than Taz was. We actually had a wind-up telephone. I mean, I think Taz just sort of stuck his head out the window and started beating drums when he wanted to tell somebody something. But we had a wind-up telephone.
Yeah. But okay, there you go. Best of humor. There we go.
Yeah, don't forget Taz's show is on YouTube now, and I because he was talking about the Habs yesterday, I just kind of put the sign of the cross on it and turned the channel. But on Tuesday, he had a pretty good show, and I'll give Taz an endorsement here. Your City, Your Voice. You can see it on YouTube now.
Oh, we love you. We love Your City, Your Voice. They're on YouTube. We're on YouTube. We have actually got now regular listeners on YouTube, right? And regular commenters on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? Which is an interesting thing. And, you know, and that's actually, it's very good that getting out on YouTube. Actually, what the good thing about being on YouTube is that you've got a permanent record, if you like, of your show.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, yeah, but hey, you're not lost to history now, Dave.
I don't know, 20 years from now, I don't want somebody says, in 2024, you said.
Well, you'll be walking around with your cane in 2044.
I'm walking around with a cane now.
Right. So basically, Paul's saying good. We're doing. I think we're doing well. That was the whole point about the move over to the move we made over to StreamYard, thanks to Invictus. You know, we moved to StreamYard to actually make it possible to do these shows. These comments that we put up are only possible because of the move to StreamYard. We never used to do that within when we were broadcasting the old way. But of course, change comes, you know, with change comes money, right? Money spent out on the product, right?
How much money are we spending on it?
Well, at the moment, I'm contributing to that. But, well, you know, we do need to actually, so we also, that's actually a discussion you and I need to have, is what are we going to do about the future of Talking Niagara?
Oh, well, yeah, maybe so.
And see if we can get that to grow.
It may be a moot point because we're all going to burn up in climate change anyway.
Yeah.
There'll be a nuclear, well, right now what's happening is in Ukraine, it looks like they're pushing the boundaries of nuclear interaction. How long do you think the U.S. and Europe are going to be able to stay out of Ukraine? Can you really think of it? Look, I'll put it this way. The United States supported Britain for 2 years before they got in the war. It was called the Lend-Lease program. They sold Britain the means by which to continue the war with Nazi Germany. They didn't get involved in it, but they could see that it was in their interest to give them the money, the arms they needed, like the U.S. and Europe is doing now to Ukraine. But sooner or later, they couldn't avoid getting into it. Is our future? Are we going to have a war with
that potentially Russia? Is our future? Yes.
Yeah. Can we keep doing the Lend-Lease thing? Pretty soon, they're running out of bodies in Ukraine right now. How can they fight a war without bodies?
Yeah. Yeah, very good question there, Dave. Something that our governments are going to need to consider, and I'm sure. I was just going to say, I'm sure Paul Lemire has got a response on that one, and there it was. Exactly. Thank you.
Joe Biden is a warmonger, and he is a genocide dude. I mean, he's handing over bombs that murder children and innocents like crazy, and he doesn't care. He could have stopped the Ukrainian war. He could have stopped it from happening but what he needed the military industrial complex to keep churning out weapons. Once they lost Afghanistan and once they lost Iraq, there was no more place for the huge amount of money being spent on weaponry. So when the Ukraine thing happened, he said, this is a good place to start spending money on war again. And when the military industrial complexes supports over 800,000 jobs directly and many, many more thousands indirectly, those are a lot of votes. Particularly those guys are union workers.
Yeah.
You
Right,
don't
I've got
want
to get,
you want a war going on all the time.
yep, I've got to get going anyway because I'm in court this morning.
Okay. I hope they don't. Do you want me to bail you out?
I don't need that. In any case,
I'll post bail for you.
This is landlord and tenant board. So I said court when I'm in tribunal, but
Okay.
you get where I'm saying.
All right.
So, yeah. So
All right.
thank you,
Without
everybody.
further ado, everyone. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.